finally hear from Mr. J.P. Tangen. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There it is. There it's on. I'm honored to address you on this, the 35th anniversary of the signing of ANILCA. My name is J.P. Tangen. I'm an attorney in active practice in the state of Alaska. I was first drawn to Alaska in 1975 in no small part because of the pending determination that up to, but not to exceed, 80 million acres of unreserved public lands in Alaska should be withdrawn for addition to or creation as units of the National Park, Forest, Wildlife Refuge, and Wild and Scenic River System. To a young attorney advisor working for the Department of Commerce in here in D.C., 80 million acres of land sounded like an awful lot of land. Accordingly, I relocated to Alaska and have fought in the trenches up there ever since. My primary vocation over the past 4 decades has been on behalf of the mining industry, although I did serve as Alaska's regional solicitor for the Department of the Interior in the early 1990s. I have also served for many years as co-chairman of the Alaska Miners Association Federal Oversight Committee, and in that committee, capacity, I've participated in the analysis and comments on literally hundreds of initiatives from federal land managing agencies that would unilaterally burden or preclude development of federal land in Alaska in direct violation of the clear language of ANILCA. In the year 2000, I had the privilege of participating in the publication of a collection of essays entitled D2 Part 2, a report to the people of Alaska on the land promises made in ANILCA 20 years later. I commend the book to you for your bedtime reading, and anybody here for that bedtime reading. It's relatively short, easily digested, and among the articles included in D2 Part 2 is the testimony that Steve Burrell, then Executive Director of the Alaska Miners Association, delivered before this very committee on August 10, 1999. It can be seen by review of his testimony that there were many open wounds on the table 20 years after the passage of ANILCA, and everything Mr. Burrell said then remains true today. But the egregious misconduct of the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service has been compounding over the ensuing 15 years. I was asked to offer testimony at this time on ANILCA, including perspectives on the Act's impacts and suggestions for improvements to the Act. I'll attempt to do so in the most positive way possible. When discussing ANILCA, the primary concern of many Alaskans, certainly those in the resource development industries, is that ANILCA was held out to be a great compromise with 2 cornerstone guarantees. First, that there would never be any more withdrawals of public land from the economic and social needs of the state of Alaska and its people. That language is in Section 101 of the Act. And second, that under Section 1110, in exchange for restrictive burdens on what turned out to be well over 100 million acres of land, federal and Alaska, there would be adequate and feasible access for economic and other purposes to the concerned land. There are many other promises contained in ANILCA. As Senator Ted Stevens observed in his preface to D2 Part 2, during the 20 years after passage, Alaskans have witnessed many disappointments and continue to do so. Pursuant to mandate, I'll list some of the problems that have emerged over the past 15 years and are ongoing to this day, and then I'll propose some suggested remedies with the hope that this bitter battle can be brought to a conclusion before resource development on federal land in Alaska is totally destroyed. The resource development, the National Park Service has employed a variety of tools to ensure that valid existing rights to develop mineral resources and NPS units in Alaska are never developed. In the case of Orange Hill, for instance, an extremely valuable copper deposit in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Monument comprising patented land was deprived of access by the Park Service on the one hand. On the other, because it had no authorized access, the owners were denied adequate compensation for it. Despite the owners literally went through the administrative process twice, to Congress twice, and to the courts twice seeking redress, and finally they gave up. Don't assume that because of this specific inholding is referred to, it's an isolated incident, however. Comparable sagas occurred in other areas of the Wrangell's Analyzed National Monument, Denali National Park, Glacier Bay, Cape Cruisenstern, and Bering Land Bridge, for instance. The methodology used by the Park Service is predictable. First, a permit must be required, then an environmental impact statement must be prepared, for which the applicant is often asked to pay. The permit is denied, and the applicant is told it can never get a permit no matter what he says, and should sell the property to the Park Service. Park Service approved appraisal is conducted, which disregards any value for the resource. The applicant turns to the courts, where unsympathetic federal judges arbitrarily constrained by APA procedures, and at the instance of the Department of Justice attorneys with an agenda, rule against the applicant, and the applicant is reduced to appealing to the Ninth Circuit, which never saw a resource development project it didn't want to scuttle. And this dance has various mutations, but the result is always the same. A similar exercise occurs with regard to access. The National Forest Service, for instance, has the right and obligation to permit logging roads through the Chugach National and Tongass National Forests. And although referred to as logging roads, they also are used by miners, hunters, and local communities, many of which are dependent upon logging and other resource development projects to support their very infrastructure. Both the national forests are known to be replete with marketable timber and mineral resources. However, as a result of the stridence of the Forest Service and the APA's insistence that the agencies are the best arbiters of their own mandates, the ability of Alaskans to use forests for resource development is vitiated. It's not to suggest the NPS is any better with regard to access. Witness the Hale versus NPS case, or the Sturgeon case, or Fish and Wildlife Refuges Services sympathetic. Witness the King Cove Road problem. The BLM, in its unique way, is determined to create gigantic areas of critical environmental concern that have all the earmarks of barring restrictions to land use and access across public lands, even though there's no particular justification for doing so other than their planning process. The BLM most recently dedicated teams of people to apparently unlimited resources to prepare reports that run to the thousands of pages to gut the purpose and language of ANILCA. The expense of analyzing and opposing these works is astronomical, and ironically doing so is a total waste of time because of the critical comments fall on deaf ears, and the agency does what it pleases without fear of reprisal. In summary, although blocking access across development on federal lands was thought to be clearly precluded by ANILCA, these preclusions have been ignored or are actively resisted by the land managing agencies. I'm well over my time. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I've listed a dozen recommendations with regard to actions that the Senate should take. This committee has a vested interest for 35 years, for 40 years. This committee has had a vested interest in ensuring that Alaska is being treated fairly by this, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but the bottom line is, after 35 years, it's time that something happened to protect the interests of the Alaskan people. Thank you.